Haere mai te whānau, ko Fraser Craig taku wingawa. Welcome family, my name is Fraser. It's my great pleasure to be hosting you here today. If it's your first time or your 100th time here with us today, I just want to invite you to consider yourself part of our great big family. You are welcome here. I hope lockdown has been treating you well. I hope you're going okay. And that you treated yourself to some takeaways now that we're at level 3. I've been missing you all heaps. And a special shout out to all the tamariki. Miss you guys. I hope you've been having some fun over the last few weeks and that you've been out and about in the sun and been playing and things like that. I'm sure we'll see each other again really soon. So be good for your parents until then. And as a family, let's all stay in touch and keep caring for each other whānau. Lots of important information will be coming out over the next few weeks as we prepare to start seeing each other again in person. So keep an eye on the church Facebook page, and if you haven't already, make sure you join the Shua Wharanui Facebook group. It's a great place to ask for help if you need anything, and you can also ask for anything through our pastoral email address, shore@svc.org.nz. So put any prayer requests or anything like that through there if you need anything. Today, Vic is leading us through the last part of our Why God series, where we've been looking at the pilgrimage when the wheels fall off. So that should be really interesting. But first we have Ellie Butler. She's going to be leading us in worship as we sing the Highlands. God bless you all. Ka kite anō.
Mountains were where you hide. Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. Oh, how long have I chased rivers from lowly seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of His supply. 'Cause in the highlands, in the heartache, you're neither more or less inclined. I would search and stop at nothing, but you're just not that hard to find. So I will praise you on the mountain, I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands, in the heartache, all the same. Oh, in the highlands, in the heartache, all the same. Oh. wherever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move mountains. Wherever I stand, if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent. Whatever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move mountains. Wherever I stand, if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent, my song of ascent. From the gravest of all valleys come the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upward from a deep but empty grave. I will praise you on the mountain, I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands, in the heartache, all the same.
Kia ora koutou, Shore Vineyard whānau. It's wonderful to be back together again as we bring to an end a series that we've been part of the whole of Term 3. We've called it Why God? Pilgrimage When the Wheels Fall Off. As part of our pilgrim series that we've been doing and will be doing all through 2021. We thought in Term 3 it would be good to look at some of the hard questions that we sometimes have to address as believers. And it seems very appropriate that we did that, which we didn't know in advance, of course, mostly under level 4 lockdown. And so we managed to be in church for the first 2 Sundays as Tim and I shared those first 2 messages. And then the next 6 weeks, including today and counting going forward, we've been under lockdown. And so we've been able to do that through our Kai Kōrero Karakia. So each week we've been able to get together around coffee or muffins or whatever it might have been in our bubbles, to have some food together, some kai, to have some kōrero, to discuss some of the things that we've talked about and to pray for each other, karakia. And it's been a wonderful way of doing that. We've had great reports of people being together, so God bless you as you've done that. It's been a brave series, I think. You know, we've talked about things like darkness and desert and silence and transition and mental health and lament, things that are often not part of your traditional church fare, and yet we've been hopeful as we've done it and Christ-centered as we've done it. And I hope you've sensed an invitation to wrestle and yet a hope at the end of it as well as we've gone through the series. You can check it all out online on svc.org.nz if you've missed any of the previous ones, or I think we've covered some important territory. You may even like to go back to some of them. And as I've prepared this final message for Why God, that's exactly what I've done this week. I've gone back over the last 7 and again just taken in some of the input that we've had in those areas. And what I'd like to do just for the next few moments is throw you a quote from each of those last 7 messages that I think might be relevant and worthwhile raising again as we bring the whole thing to a close. So in that first week I was speaking, and here's something that I used to set up the series. Pilgrimage, I said, is a pretty attractive proposition when the trail is well marked, the weather is fine, and there's a comfortable bed and good food waiting for you at the end of the day. But what about when the weather turns, when God seems distant or absent, when what used to make sense doesn't anymore? And with that, we were on our journey. Tim Wood, our associate pastor, was speaking the next week. He raised the question, how God? And here's one of the things that he said. Most of our learning, most of our maturity comes from going through the hard stuff rather than things going our own way. which was another invitation to wrestle in this process, because there's something good that comes out of it at the end. Our first lockdown service, Kai Kōrero Karakia, Fran was speaking on the desert, and here's a quote from her. "There is no place God cannot be. There is no place God is not with you. Even in the lonely place, we can find God." We move on to week 4, and then Makarita led us in a service which encompassed the whole idea of mental and emotional well-being, taha hinenaro. And she introduced us to Stephen, who had battled depression and for the first time shared his depression story. And here was some of Stephen's advice coming out of his own battle through the Why God process. "The expectations we put on ourselves," he says, "are far higher than they need to be and far higher than others are putting on us. We need to be kind to ourselves, to tolerate imperfection in ourselves." I think a lot of us would resonate with that. We got into September the 5th, it was Father's Day, and I spoke that day on broad shoulders, on those who helped carry us and sometimes those who let us down, who should have carried us. And here's a thought that I carried through on that day. One important point is to have permission to seek help, to grieve, to cry out. And it's in this sharing that we're invited to look around us and to discover broad shoulders who have played parts in our lives. 2 weeks ago, Tim was back talking lament. Again, here's a pearl from what he had to say. "The places where we have been hurt will be the places that we heal from." Going rather deep there. And then finally last week, Fran talked about those transitional times, uncertain times in our faith. And she said this: "Build a raft of what's left, but it will be your raft, and it will be great, because it's come from the pieces that God has provided." I do trust some of those quotes will be provocative and encouraging, and a reminder of the territory that we've gone through as we've been in the last 7 weeks, asking the question, why God? And then, of course, we come today to the end of the series, and we again ask ourselves some of the questions, or allow ourselves to ask ourselves some of the questions that do sometimes prove difficult in our faith journey. I've been reading in Hebrews chapter 2, and I'm fascinated with some of the early verses around there. The writer of the Hebrews begins by quoting the psalmist from Psalm chapter 8, and says this: "What is man and woman that you bother with them? And why take a second look their way?" He kind of asks the why God question. Why do you even bother with us, God? It's a different take on why God, isn't it? Goes on and says, "You made them not as quite as high as the angels, bright with Eden's dawn." And then beautifully writes, "Then you put them in charge of your entire handcrafted world," quoting from Psalm 8. And then the writer to the Hebrews goes on and adds, "In putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. And yet at present we do not see everything subject to them. But we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while now, crowned with glory and honor. Yet at present we do not see everything subject to them." Sometimes we're going to ask the question, why God? But, and it's a really big but we do see Jesus. As we come to the end of the series, if I could maybe put on a little, I hope, wise hat, if I could sort of say some things that may take us through some of these questioning times. Here are 3 things that I would like to offer as we round out the series. I think when we come to a why God question, one of the things I'd encourage you to is to actually go there. So often we try to avoid the sort of the harshness maybe, or the difficulty of answering some of the really key questions. I know over the last few years, one of my great learnings has been to give myself permission, and with people that I'm working with, either as a pastor or a spiritual director, the permission to go there, to go to the places that seem tough, that seem barren, that seem difficult, because I think there's real healing and usefulness in that process. I think in this time of lockdown, maybe those of us who have been able to connect with God have done so on a more limited basis, have sort of drawn into ourselves all the things that we know about God, even in difficult circumstances, and allowed that to be enough. And as we come out of lockdown, we'll be able to think on wider horizons again. But we'll be better off for the process of having been able to go there. I think, though, it's important for us to also know that we need to go there with others. We need to go there together. Almost the worst thing, it seems to me, that we can do is to try and to go into these why God questions, these barrenness, the silences, the laments, the mental health struggles, the deserts, the shipwrecks that we've talked about. The worst thing that we can do is to go into those places alone. And yet there does seem to be almost an inevitable withdrawal when I'm not feeling good, as I separate myself from others. And so when I'm going in my deconstructions, or when I'm going in my, I'm not sure, kind of why God allowed that to happen, when I'm asking my questions, we tend to try and do it alone, or we end up alone for whatever reason. And I think my strong advice would be, let's go there together. When we go there, we can be strong for each other. What a benefit that can truly be for us. And then finally, the whole idea of looking for the God who is already there, looking for the God who is already there. Remember, the Hebrews writer says, we don't understand all these things. We ask the why God questions. We don't know why God does these things or allows these things to happen, but we do see Jesus. And I think one of the things that I've learned so strongly over a lifetime, really, but I know it better over more recent years, is to look for God in the unfortunate circumstances, in the circumstances we end up, in the why God moments, and we will discover that he's already been there, that Jesus already walked this walk, and that God is already there to introduce himself to us and to reintroduce himself to us. The great weight of Scripture and church history points us to a God who walks with us in the tough times, rather than just, as we would sometimes hope, he would pluck us out of it. Paul says in Philippians 3:17 that I want to know Christ. I want to know the power of his resurrection, which is just so amazing, and I want to participate in his suffering. Somehow those two things are going to come together, and that is going to introduce me to really knowing who and what Jesus is. Back in that first message that I was able to share in church on August the 8th, I introduced you to my friends Danny and Penny Meyer. They are fellow vineyard pastors who I've got to know from the States. We've been involved in missions together in various parts of the world. And they've had a terribly difficult journey, really, over the last 10 years or so of recovery for Penny from being very badly hurt in a car accident, and then battling various stages and forms of cancer. And they've learned a lot in that process, and they're still in that process, to be honest. And Danny has put together some of his thoughts that he's learned as they've walked through this together, very publicly and very bravely. And he wrote on social media just a few months ago something I think is really helpful. I think it was helpful as we began this journey, helpful as we come kind of to an end of the journey. And this is what Danny says. How am I to walk through this season? How should I respond to the circumstances each day brings? Will I only follow him when the path is smooth and the journey is straight? Only letting him lead me if he explains himself and his purposes before each bend in the road? More than knowing why, I want to learn how to find him in each moment, how to reflect him in the darkness, how to feel his closeness in this journey. I am finding as I focus on how, I do far better. I sense Jesus, his presence, and his provision. And so as we bring the series to an end, but not an end to our Why God questions, they will continue. But as we bring the series to an end, may you know something of the sense of Jesus who promises to be here, the sense of his presence, and the sense of his provision. Kia kaha, Shore Vineyard. It's been a wonderful thing to share this with you. We look forward to future Sundays where we'll still be online and we'll be looking at other topics. And so we'll be together again for Kai Kōrero Karakia. But for now, we sign off our Why God series with these questions, which you might like to pause the video now And around in your bubbles, have some kōrero around these questions, asking yourselves and seeing what you can glean and how God might interact with those things. God bless you. What a pleasure it is, and what a pleasure it's been.